Thank you very much again, Dr. for that introduction. And thank you everyone for coming. It's great to have you here. Welcome you to the first launch of my book. Today, like Deacon Egbertokun says, I'm going to be talking about why Africa cannot feed itself and the way forward. Why Africa cannot feed itself and the way forward. I believe if there's any time topics like this need to be discussed, is now, especially with what is happening all around the world in 2022. But before we go into this book, we'll try and look at some of the things that the answers that the book tried to answer. Because this is a very big and broad topic, and it's so important that we clarify what it is we are trying to do. Before we continue, we're going to look at these 6 questions, which I believe will help to bring my presentation today into context. My name is Yemi Adeshina, and I'm a qualified social worker, a project manager. But also, I left United Kingdom in 2006 to go to Africa to go and start farming. And I discovered very, very quickly that with all my effort, it's still going to be hard, except something changes beyond me and beyond farming. Africa will still not be able to feed itself. I want us to look at these questions and try and let it be like an introduction to this topic. We all know that Africa is home to 60% of the world uncultivated land, arable land. Is it not ironic that a continent that has 60% of the world uncultivated arable land cannot feed itself? Secondly, the recent war in Ukraine and Russia. Not many of us in Africa knows that we import 30 to 40% of our wheat from Ukraine. For not many of us know where Ukraine is. But suddenly, in February this year, 2022, a war broke out in Ukraine and in Russia. And typically Africa will think there's no way it's going to affect us because those two countries are 6,000 to 7,000 miles away from us. But 3-4 months down the line, we discovered that as a result of this war, the wheat became very scarce and the high cost of bread jumped in Africa. And as a result, it was a roller coaster. From high cost of bread came high cost of rice. From high cost of rice came high cost of beans. From high cost of beans come even high cost of garri that are not produced in Ukraine. Why? Why is it that what is happening 6,000-7,000 miles can affect us, can affect our food production so seriously in Africa? Another question I want us to look at it is this. Why is the yield per acre of crop lower in Africa? For example, I'm a practicing farmer, like I said. If you grow cassava in Ghana or Nigeria or Ivory Coast, the maximum yield you will get per acre is approximately 13 to 15 metric tons per acre. However, when they cultivate the same cassava in Thailand, they get 22 metric tons. That means from the beginning of planting, we are about 70% below. And that's why at the end of the day, Thailand are able to import cassava to Europe instead of Africa, where cassava is mostly grown. Another question we need to answer when we are talking about food sufficiency in Africa is why do Ghana and Africa that produce so much cocoa, yet 90% of the chocolate consumed in these two countries are made in Europe? Unfortunately, Europe cannot produce cocoa. We're going to be looking at geography and why some crops are produced somewhere and some crops are not produced somewhere else. Another question I wanted us to look at is Africa produces 75% of the global production of cocoa worldwide. Yet only 2% of the $100 billion that is made from chocolate belongs to Africa. We produce 75% of the cocoa. We make 2% in the overall benefit, overall $100 billion. And it makes $2 billion out of the $100 billion made from cocoa and cocoa products. Yet we produce 75% of the cocoa globally. Another question we need to look at, why is the poultry imported from France to Togo 20% cheaper than the one produced in Lomé, a village in Lomé, very close to the capital? To get poultry to Togo from France, they have to produce it, slaughter it, process it, freeze it, frozen it, put it in a ship crate, ship it all the way 4,000 miles to Lomé. And yet, with all of that, the poultry produced in France, the poultry brought from France to Togo, is 20% cheaper than the one produced in Togo itself. And finally, how come the price of cocoa and cotton, when they say crash in commodity product, how come it always affects the raw material? It never affects the cocoa. In 1970, 1980, there was a crash in raw commodity price, cocoa, cotton, and coffee. And as a result, Africa lost. That was the beginning of African after misfortune, after independence. Yet, the cost of chocolate, the cost of textile, the cost of brewed coffee never falls. Why is that happening? Because except we continue to look at this program holistically, we will not be able to fully understand what is really going on. And that's what this book is all about. We try to look at it holistically. Before we go too far, I'm going to tell you about my other books that I've written, which will be of interest to many of you. I've written about The Profitable Pig Farmer, a step-by-step guide to pig farming. In fact, you go to Amazon and go and check it, there are lots of reviews. Many people have read it from all over the world, from Papua New Guinea to Philippines, from Philippines to Cameroon to Rwanda, and it has become a pig Bible for many pig farmers all around the world. The second book I would recommend is What Ancient Africa Knew. I think this is the must-have for anybody that has a young person, any parent or young person in Africa, because the way our history has been projected to us is that as I see, we have not contributed to the civilization of the world. But it cannot be far from true. I've done a video on it, but it's the book I recommend that every young person, when they reach the age of 12, the age of 18, 12 to 18 in Africa, should read as part of their curriculum, so that they can begin to understand they are from an elaborate, they are descendants of an elaborate culture. The book I'm talking about today is going to be Why Africa Cannot Feed Itself. It's like, so by the time, I think you can get it from, you can get the book from Amazon, and if you need to call it, there's going to be a number at the bottom of this video that you can call if you're interested in getting the book. Now, what I try to do in this Why Africa Cannot Feed Itself and the way forward, it should try and explain all of these answers, all of these questions and more, to align the complexity of the challenges and realities confronting the African continent food sufficiency. Because except we look at it holistically, we will not be able to solve this problem. And this problem has persisted for a very long time, that if it's easy, it will not be solved. It will have been solved a long time ago. And the book looks at how Africa can move forward from food scarcity to become breadbasket. Case in point, Ukraine were unable to export their wheat to the world because of the war. Suddenly, Rwanda is getting, suddenly, Somalia is getting into famine. Ethiopia begins to struggle. And it's just 6 months into the war. And the continent has 60% of the uncultivated land in the world. There's an irony. I want to say the book is written in Africa by an African farmer for Africans. Now, to look at this, to approach this problem, what I did was to look at it from African perspective. And there's an African saying that said, happy family are all alike, while every unhappy family is unhappy in its way. I believe food production is like a marriage, or food production is as complex as a marriage. Now we all know that for a marriage to be successful, many different aspects of marriage must come together nicely. It starts from sexual attraction, that's where it starts from. Then agreement about money, child discipline, religion, in-laws, another vital issue. Now, failure in any one of those essentials can lead to marriage failure. So you can have 5 or 6 of all these things. The failure in 1 or 2 of them can make a marriage to fall apart. So the question is this: to understand food scarcity in Africa, we need to examine farming and food production in Africa from the beginning of the continent's existence to date. So in this book, what we tried to do was to start looking at it from the origin of Africa, because we need to know the foundation of Africa, the formation of Africa, the structure, the climate, the soil structure, the fact that is the first thing that people started cultivating land. They've been cultivating also a place for 10,000 years. Definitely they will have disturbed the soil. Especially when they've been doing farming and agriculture. So that's how we look at it. We examine what has happened and how this has played an advantage or disadvantage into Africa in Africa. Now, according to Aristotle, it is possible to fail in many ways, while to succeed is only possible in one way. Very interesting. It is possible to fail in many ways because failure belongs to the class of the unlimited. There are many ways to fail, but there's only one way to be successful. And one of the things we try to do in this book is to look at what can Africa do to become self-sufficiency. And to do this, we need to look at the problem holistically. What is peculiar about this book is that we try to look at it holistically and not to overlook anything, and to discuss it in detail, so that we can begin to see what has happened, what has not happened, and what we can do and what we cannot do. To do this, we started by looking at the geography and environmental variables. We look at how Africa was formed. Have you ever wondered why the first human being was able to survive? The origin of the first human being is in Africa. It has been, scientists have agreed, have come to the conclusion that the origin of man starts from Africa. Have you ever wondered why African continent was the first continent that human being has ever been on? It's because of many factors. We need to look at it's because of geographical factors. It's one of the first continents to form, to become solid, to become stable, and its position is very close to the equator, which means that any animal can survive in Africa. It's after human being has survived in Africa, they started moving to other places. We're going to be looking at that in a subsequent lecture. Then secondly, we look at the historical factor. We look at the impact of slavery and colonialism on Africa. Now, people say it's far-fetched, it has happened a long time ago. But one thing you have to realize, if you are taking from from the age of 15 to 25 from a continent for 400 years, at least for 12 generations, there's no big shortfall in that population. And after that, if you colonize that country for another 100 years, after all of that, there's not going to be having the ability of the country to be able to take care of itself. We're going to be looking at that in detail. It's not the only reason, but it's a factor that many people overlook. But it's just a factor that we need to consider and look at the impact and see how we can deal with this. We also look at the biological factor. I was telling you about the yield. How come things are not growing very well in Africa? It won't grow very well in some certain part of Africa. If human being has been in Africa for 10,000 years and they've been farming and raising animals, there's no way they will have overused the soil and one has some part of the soil. But there's a part in Ethiopia where human being has been living since the creation of human being. So you can begin to understand the state of the land in that area. They will look at urbanization, population growth, how it's affecting Africa. Somebody was saying to me that Africa is overpopulated. Later we're going to look at it where Africa is not overpopulated. Africa is just getting to the population it's supposed to be. We're going to be looking at that we're going to be looking at that in our presentation. And if you want more information about that, you can look at our books. Then we're going to look at the post-independent challenges. Because it's one thing for Africa to blame other people for blame slavery and colonialism for everything that's happened to it. Most African countries became independent in the 60s. That means we've been independent for approximately 80 years. And that means we cannot just blame it in the past. We have to look at what Africans themselves have been doing to help Africa not to be able to feed itself. We're going to look at the effect of poor leadership, weak institutions, and how this has impacted the ability of the continent to be able to feed itself. And again, we look at the prevailing external and microeconomic factors, which I believe is very, very important. The role of what the colonial did after the independence, how foreign aid, foreign debt, foreign aid, IMF, World Bank have been used to subdue Africa after colonization. These are facts that need to be looked at. You know, many times the West try to help Africa, but sometimes if they really want to help Africa, it's not through foreign aid, it's not through debt, it's going to be through fair international trade. That takes us to I've ever wondered why the West prefer taking raw materials from Africa and bringing it to Europe to develop. Despite the fact, it's very easy for us to talk about the environment, that we care for the environment, but really the best way to care for the environment is to produce the raw material. Instead of taking bulky raw materials, using carbon to travel to take them to Europe. Europeans are supposed to come to Africa, turn the bulk material into refined goods, and then travel with the refined goods. Let me give you a good example. You don't see West taking ship is raised in New Zealand and Australia. You don't see the West taking ship and go from live ship and go from New Zealand, or land, ship and go and land from Australia, shipping it to UK and come and process it in UK. It doesn't make sense. It's not economical. So what they did is that they process it in New Zealand and they take the processed good to Europe. But when it comes to Africa, it's not the case. It's not only not environmentally unfriendly to do it the way we are doing it. If you are really serious about ozone layer, if you are really serious about climate change, the whole world needs to start looking at how we handle raw materials in Africa. We're going to be looking at that in details. And finally, we're going to look at the role that multinational plays in Africa. I want to tell you people that in the West that if your multinational company that, let's take banana for example. Many of you go to the shops on Saturday or Sunday to go and buy banana. You buy 5 banana for £1, and you never wonder how that happens. This banana was taken in Cameroon. You must have paid the farmer in Cameroon 5 or 10p because they have to ship it. They have to put chemical and ethylene in it. They have to protect it, put it in a cold environment, ship it all the way to UK or to Europe, then keep it in a frozen room, then bring it and then package it and bring it to the store. So when they take it and they reach a room temperature, it becomes ripened. If they decide to pay farmers in Cameroon 15p, your banana will become £1.50 and £2, and you guys will protest. So it's very easy to say that you send aid to Africa, but if you decide to pay, if your multinational decide to pay Africa a fair deal for the raw material that they are buying, you will not need to send aid to Africa. And again, many people complain that immigrants are coming from Africa to Europe. They will keep on coming because as long as they cannot do any serious job in Africa, they will always come to the motherland, because motherland is where all their products have been. So these are what we look at in details. And I went through this very quickly because in a subsequent lesson, in the subsequent section, we'll be looking in more details about in detail. But one of the things I did in my book is to expatiate in details what it really means and how it's affecting Africa. Now, fair to deal with each one of these important factors have doomed food sufficiency in Africa. That is, this problem has become persistent because Many times when people try to deal, when Africans try to deal with it, they try to deal with it. When the West try to help, but they help only a bit. But the area that will affect them, they will leave it alone. They are happy to give us aid when we are in famine. But they will not increase the price of, but they will not give our banana farmers additional 5p, a living wage to keep them happy there. Rather, they will take it for cheap and then wonder why Africa are not able to settle in their continent. Fixing one of few combination of this factor without looking at it holistically have missed the mark. It's amazing that as developed and sophisticated this world that we live in, if an alien should come down and look at this earth, he will call this world a failed state. It's very easy when you listen to Newsbeat, CNN, BBC, they say Somalia is a failed state, Sudan is a failed state, Yemen is a failed state, Afghanistan is a failed state, Syria is a failed state. Unfortunately, with the wealth, with the numbers of billionaires and billionaires that we have in the world, with 200 miles per hour train that we have and jet, if the alien come to this world, they will call this world a failed state. Because according to Professor Charles T. Cole, he said there are 3 factors that define a failed state. A country that cannot do the following for 20% of its population is already a failed state. And what are these factors, Mr. Professor Charles T? 1, country that cannot able to effectively deliver basic goods and services such as food to its people. 20% of its people is a failed state. 2, country security gap. Country that cannot protect its population from armed invasion or civil war is a failed state. Thirdly, country that the well-off deliberately refuse to manage the distribution of wealth to all its people is a failed state. To 20% of its people is a failed state. Africa is about 20% of the population of the world. And they all experience all these things I've mentioned. They are not able to have basic food. They are not able to protect. There is war all the time. There is war, invasion of war. And the well-offs, which is the West, are deliberately managing the distribution of wealth. So some people remain poor, while some people remain wealthy. So if the alien look at this world, they will not be impressed with that Jeff Bezos is flying to the space or Richard Branson is flying to the space. They'll be more concerned that it's a failed state because 20% of its population are not able to have the basic thing according to our own definition of a failed state. Let's look at some of the quotes. As we round up this particular section, I'm going to be looking at some of the quotes that I've got from even the World Bank themselves. He said, we have failed in Africa along with everybody else. We have not fully understood the problem and we have not identified the priorities. That's by Ernest Stern of the World Bank. Heinemann says that Africa's biggest problem is that too many people are going around the continent with solutions to problems they don't understand. Many of these solutions are half-baked. Not only that, many Africans don't understand African problems. Africa is dying because it has cut itself in pieces. In its ill plan, ill-advised attempt to modernize itself. That's Jubi Diallo, United Nations Office. And finally, I'll finish with a quote from Stephen Rosenfeld from Washington Post. He said, it is hard to look at Africa without feeling that something has gone terribly wrong. It is not just a spectacle of suffering that troubles us. It is the sense that we of America and the West, who thought we knew how to help these people, did not know well enough, although we acted with it. It is broadly recognized that our advice were deeply flawed, not simply among critics, but in the establishment circle that provide funds and willpower. That is, Africa has been receiving advice from people that don't even know the problem. I don't blame them because ultimately it's Africa that will have to solve this problem. We all know there is not an easy solution and not a single solution. To be successful, we need to avoid many failures, many things that causes failure, and do many things right. There's an African saying that said, if in Yoruba language, means if lack and adversity struck a child for 20 years, And poverty assaults a young person for 30 years. If the young person survives and does not die or give up, even the calamity by now should be fed up and move away from the child. I believe the best time to invest was yesterday. The next best time to change things is today. But I believe that the best time to change things is when we are ready. Winston Churchill says, those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Before I close, let me just quickly look at the human cost of hunger. 30% of the population of Africa, nearly 400 million, are only eating 2 square meals a day. Not 3, not lunch, not in between, just 2 square meals a day. 25% of the population only eat 1 meal a day. That is 248 million. And many of you have eaten 2 meals already and are planning to eat the third one. Conflict and instability induce hunger among 33 million in 10 countries in Africa. 30% of the children suffer from acute malnutrition. Human hunger causes 2 deaths per day for every 10,000 people. And 3 million children under the age of 5 every year, nearly every second. In the second part of this session, we'll start with looking at one of the first topics that I mentioned, geography matters. The role of geography in food production in Africa. I think it's a very important topic that cannot be underemphasized. The role of geography in African food production. Thank you very much.
Heard what you've heard today. Please kindly subscribe to our channel. Kindly subscribe to our channel, and do not forget to hit the notification bell for any new information.